If you've learned your first few guitar chords and are looking to use them in a song, it can be a little bit of a dismaying experience to realise that learning the chords was only half the battle. Then you've got to move between the shapes and all the while trying to keep it sounding musical. If you've struggled with this, then please keep watching because I have 3 ways of developing your strumming technique. Okay, first of all then, we're going to need some chords to play. I've chosen a very simple 4-chord progression using open position chords that goes E minor, A minor, D, G. On the assumption that most people learn those chords pretty early on. If you haven't, or you don't like that sequence, you can do this with absolutely anything. The chord progression doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be 4 chords long, it can be 2 chords. You can even just practice this on a single chord to get used to the technique to start with if you like. But I'm going to play through that one. First challenge, we're going to need to be able to count to 4. Which might sound easy, but some people do struggle with this whilst playing at the same time. So we're going to just simply count a beat of 4 on each chord, strumming each one. The vast majority of popular music you hear is divided into groups of 4. It's the underlying count of the rhythm in most songs you'll hear. So very, very obvious place to start. So all we're going to do to start with, strum each chord, each beat with a downward strum like this. And if you do struggle with the timekeeping of this, there are a lot of devices that can help you out, the metronome being a classic. Here on YouTube there's loads of great drum loops you can play along with. I would make the case for trying to develop your internal clock though. It's another plate to keep spinning, I realise, but if you can get used to tapping your foot steadily while you're playing, that can be really, really useful in developing your timekeeping. But anyway, what we're going to do to start off with is just strum each chord 4 times like this. 1, and if you're at the early stages of this, that might even feel a little bit fast. As my students are very used to hearing me say, slowly as you like, but steady as you can. The speed you do it at absolutely doesn't matter, but really try and make an effort to keep it as regular and steady as you can. And in terms of the technique there, you'll notice the strumming, we're keeping it as relaxed as possible, completely from the wrist. You want to avoid kind of dragging the pick through the strings. Try not to tense up and move from the elbow or anything like that. You can play it really, really softly to begin with. And once you've practiced that for a little bit, you're probably ready to add a little bit of detail. So let's see what we can do. Right, so the first detail we're going to add to that is something called an offbeat. An offbeat being simply a strum in between the main 1, 2, 3, 4 count. We're going to put our offbeat in between the 2 and the 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to become 1, 2 and 3, 4. 1, 2 and 3, 4. And that and we're going to play with an up strum. Now an important point about the up strum, a lot of people when they first try this do something like this. End up with that kind of drag again. When you're doing these upstrokes, bear a really, really simple thing in mind. You don't have to play each and every string of the chord. In fact, in many ways, it's better if you don't. It gives it a much more kind of layered and textured sound if you just kind of catch the first couple of strings with the upstroke. So rather than going, which sounds a little bit laboured and awkward, we go, so that upstroke, in many ways, it's really just to kind of reset, reposition your hand for the next downstroke. But yeah, you only need to catch the top part of the chord for that to sound really, really effective. The rest of the pattern stays exactly the same, so we end up with this. So it's beginning to sound a little bit more like a song. Let's add one more detail for now and see if we can really impress people. The third and last detail to experiment with for now then is a little bit more subtle but really, really effective if you can get this right. It's basically a kind of emphasis, what's known in musical terms as an accent, where we're going to play one of the beats a little bit more strongly than the others. And we're going to do this on beat 2. So rather than the slightly monotonous 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3, 4, we're just going to lean into that 2 a little bit more. So it becomes more like 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3, 4. A little bit like this. And hopefully you can hear, if I did that effectively, it adds a little bit of groove to it, a little bit of life. You can experiment with putting the accent in different places, of course. A more obvious one, perhaps more common, would be to hear it on the 1, on the chord change, to give that a little bit of emphasis, so more like this. To kind of really highlight the chord changes. Beat 2 just gives it a little bit of something different, I think. So there we go, a few simple ideas to get you started with strumming. Really hope that was of some use. If it was, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll be back with something else very soon. Thanks for watching. Cheers.